Chair, and Ms. Lynch, congratulations. It's quite an honor to be in the place that you are today. I want to compliment you on your distinguished career, and I've also noted over the course of your testimony just how much pride is in the eyes of your friends and supporters here. So, congratulations.
I've looked over.
I had a question for you, and it stems from, I also want to thank you for dealing with last week when we had to move the venue and the time around for the meeting. I appreciate your graciousness and spending some time with me last week. And I really want to maybe start where we left off with some of the discussions, and I think that Senator Flake and Senator Lee and Senator Schumer have also echoed the concerns about the limited resources and how you would prioritize things within the within your future prospective new responsibilities. And I guess something that strikes home for me has to do with certain elections laws. And North Carolina, I'm not familiar, or how familiar you are with some of the elections laws that have been passed over the past couple of years, but in the context of at least one case that was brought against the state of North Carolina by Mr. Holder, where the law was more or less the foundation of that law was the Indiana law, which has been held up by upheld by the Supreme Court 6-3. Given the limited resources within the AG's office and the Department of Justice, what are your thoughts on pursuing laws that are likely to end up in the same state, particularly laws like North Carolina that went much further than the Indiana law that was upheld?
Certainly, sir. I believe that the right to vote obviously is the cornerstone of our democracy.
As do I.
And certainly I think that states obviously have an interest in protecting that right to vote also, as well as regulating it and making it safe and free and open for everyone. And I believe that many states are acting with exactly that view in mind. Certainly with respect to the North Carolina statute and case, I know that it's under litigation now. I believe there will be a trial at some point in time. I'm not familiar with the status of the case now, so I can't comment on that specific case or that specific statute. But what I can say is that with respect to how the department will look at voting rights issues is with a view towards protecting the right to vote and hopefully working with the states to ensure that all the interests are met. Certainly all voter ID laws are not problematic. As you've noted, the court has outlined situations in which they are useful and serve a fundamentally important purpose, and the department has, under the previously utilized doctrine of pre-clearance, actually approved voter ID laws. So I don't think that we can, at this point, without knowing how a case will be presented, say which way the department will go in viewing it. But given the fundamental importance of the right to vote, should an issue be raised, it is something that the Department of Justice has an obligation to review and consider whether or not it should get involved.
In the example of the law that was passed by North Carolina and the case that was brought against North Carolina. In fact, I was named in the case because at the time I was Speaker of the House. I'm just curious how, as you go forward and you're dealing with the challenges in this office of, as I believe Senator Schumer said, trying to focus your resources on the bad actors, the hardened criminals, the difficult challenges that the department faces. In a case that has some 10 attorneys on it, focused on, no less than 10, I believe, focused on that, I would hope that there would be some focus on, is that the best and highest use, if, given the merits of the case and other laws that have gone to the Supreme Court, that it's likely to end in a situation where it's going to rule in favor of the state, and at the expense of those resources, it could be used for other purposes. I mean, what is your thought on going into this role and taking a look at cases like that and maybe determining priorities based on the likely outcome? Have you given any thought to that?
Well, certainly, Senator, as we review a case, both throughout my career as a prosecutor and as U.S. Attorney, we always look to the possibility of how a court will view a particular matter. But first and foremost, whether the case involves voting or any other important right, is the issue of what is the evidence that's presented and what is the relevant law, what is the interest being protected. and if it relates to a core function of the Department of Justice, such as protecting the rights of citizens, keeping our citizens safe, or protecting the right to vote, it is a matter that we would be obligated to look into. Whether or not a matter would result in litigation would, of course, depend upon a variety of factors, which are not in front of me today, about the nature of the law and how it was written, and essentially whether it comported with those laws that were previously approved both by the department and by courts. Certainly with respect to the North Carolina case, I believe the matter is in litigation. It's not something that I'm intimately familiar with. I have not been involved in the management of that case to date. I look forward to learning more about it should I be confirmed, and I believe the matter will proceed to court, and we will await the results there.
And Ms. Lynch, I do have a question just based on the final comment that you made there with respect to the case, because it gives me some sense of whether or not we can look at this objectively and make sure that we're using the resources of DOJ in the most effective way. I think in January of 2014, you said that people try and take over the State House and reverse the goals that have been made in voting in this country. I presume, since I was the person that took over the State House, I would be included by reference. And you go on to say, and in my home state of North Carolina, has brought lawsuits against those voting rights changes that seek to limit our ability to stand up and exercise our rights as citizens. So in my limited time, I know that I'll have another opportunity to ask questions. I had some sense that that maybe perhaps you were somewhat familiar with what had been done in North Carolina. And again, with the backdrop of other laws that seem to have disposed of whether or not what North Carolina has done, I took great care to make sure that we made heroic efforts to preserve everyone's right to vote. I may come back around and ask you a few more questions to that, to this effect. But I want to move on to something that's completely out of there, and it has to do with something that's very important to me. One of the reasons I ran was on veterans issues and on taking care of those who have taken care of us. And one question that I have, I hope that you will look at and perhaps consider in my follow-up questions, giving me a response if you have time to speak with others. But the Public Safety Officers Benefits Program is a problem. We have people who are making claims there who are not getting their claims resolved on a timely basis. And I've heard of a number of reports where, and this is in the event of a death, that I would like to think that we would place a priority on resolving these claims and clearing the backlog. And if you have an opportunity, and you won't have a lot because you'll be sitting right there, but if I could get some sense of what that will be as a priority if you are confirmed as Attorney General, it's something personally important to me. I think it's the least we can do for the families. The one other thing I'll tell you that I think that we're going to find a lot of common ground should you be confirmed is on the issue of cybersecurity. I consider this to be something that the Attorney General, all law enforcement, all prosecutorial districts across this nation need the tools to make sure that we get control of this quickly. I'd like some idea, based on your knowledge of how we're currently doing, if you have any sense of where you would go as a priority should you be confirmed.
Certainly, Senator. With respect to cybersecurity, there are a number of areas in which would be my focus should I become confirmed as Attorney General. Within our law enforcement community, I would work to ensure that they had the technological resources needed to stay ahead of this threat, both from a human resource perspective as well as computers and the like. With respect to the U.S. Attorney community and the Department of Justice community, I would make sure that our prosecutors receive the appropriate training to manage this important issue. As I've seen in my practice as U.S. Attorney, cyber issues are now in every area of practice that we have. That will continue to be the case, and I'm sure that should I become confirmed as Attorney General, I will see that throughout the Department of Justice. So I will work to strengthen the resources in the Criminal Division and the National Security Division that deal with these cases. But, Senator, another thing that I think is very important as we combat cyber attacks and deal with cybersecurity is the relationship between government and private industry. I believe that there's a very, very important collaborative relationship to be built there. It is being built. I've seen it. I have participated in conferences with both financial sector parties as well as pharmaceutical industry parties on this important issue. And we've had very, very good, positive, collaborative results involving the reporting of cyber attacks as well as law enforcement's ability to work with private industry to gain knowledge of their systems to prevent attacks as well. So I think we also, should I become Attorney General, one of my priorities would be strengthening this connection between government and private industry as well.
Thank you very much. Senator Schumer mentioned earlier, I meant to mention in my opening comments that we have a number of very capable basketball teams in North Carolina beyond the Blue Devils and the Tar Heels, many of whom I think this year could beat the Knicks.
Well, well, Mr. Tillis, Senator, as an early Carolina fan, I have to say that is likely true.